everyone, welcome to Season 2 of Scared in the Name of Science, Episode 2, Liminality, Space and Creatures. I am super pumped to be presenting my first episode since our break. So before we get into things, Rox, what are your thoughts on liminality?
I think there are lots of different liminal spaces. It's one of those things that we don't really understand in science yet. We know it's a thing, obviously I won't explain what it is because you're going to do that, but we don't know how to utilise it or what it is beyond our scope of understanding scientifically at the moment, but I love a good liminal space.
Obviously there are kind of multiple ways that you can consider liminal space. Mm-hmm. At this stage I'm assuming that you're referring to liminal spaces in between universes or alternative ones.
Not really, I was thinking more like doorways and stuff.
To other places.
Yes.
So, yeah, so liminal spaces can also refer to just transitionary spaces in our own world, just to float that out there.
Yeah. I will say my other frame of reference for this is an episode of Charmed where they are dealing with, like, I can't remember if it's pixies or fairies or goblins. Might have been goblins, actually. But essentially they can only get you if you're in a liminal space.
Oh, that's really interesting. Literally never seen Charmed.
Oh, it's such a good TV show. 10 out of 10 recommend.
Oh, okay. That's really cool, though. Yeah. Liminality is defined by Oxford Reference as the ritual space or phase of transition in which a person is no longer what they are, but not yet what they will be.
It talks about a person.
So the way I think of that is teenagers. They're not a child anymore, but they're not yet an adult. So I'd say that being a teenager is very liminal.
That's really interesting because a lot of these stories that we find tend to be from like 11, 12-year-olds.
Yeah. A liminal creature or a liminal space will exist in two simultaneous states. Some creatures of folklore that occupy liminal spaces, supposedly, are ghosts and fairies.
Da, 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 da.
So I think one of the best examples to get you in the right mindset of considering liminality is the idea of the back rooms. Rox, is this something you're familiar with?
Yes, I've heard about the back rooms quite a lot. Essentially, if I'm right here, at the modern telling of this, the back rooms is like this old abandoned shopping centre or mall if you're American, and someone is exploring it except they can't find their way out and they discover horrendous creatures and pass through the rooms and it's all a bit creepy and disconcerting. It's a big pop culture thing for teenagers at the moment. The back rooms is just a new name for like an old idea, really. I love how they come back around again and again, but reimaginized and made modern. It's just really fun. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think the best way that I've seen it summarised is really it's quite a modern horror concept. You might have heard like little snippets of references like Shrek in the Back Rooms, which is from Roblox, I think.
Shrek in the Back Rooms.
Shrek in the Back Rooms, yeah.
That sounds like a really naughty film.
I do you know what, I hope it's not, because I only hear about this kind of stuff from like my baby brother.
Oh no!
Who is like he's like a little teenager. He's a big Roblox boy, and I just hear like bits and pieces about like various creatures chasing you through the back rooms, and I think it's Shrek chasing you through the back rooms. So
but I do think as well that when I say this is just like a modern version, if we think about going into the past, it used to be people would be chased through the moors or through a forest.
Yes, 100%.
And that's
I agree.
how it's then been modernised in the modern day. You don't really have those massive forests, at least in the UK anymore, that you could get like thoroughly lost in. I think you still do in the States, but
well, linking back to the Hellhounds episode, I was talking a little bit about the Jewelstone in Dartmoor, in which the Whist Hounds will chase you through the moors then.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool because Dartmoor very much fits the liminal space. It's an ancient rainforest. My partner and I have been there quite a few times, and we've wandered on the moors, and there's just been points where you're looking around and you're thinking, I could literally be in any time period right now. Regardless of, you know, what you're wearing, phone in your pocket, from scenery alone, you could be at any point, any season. Yeah.
I have that a lot when I'm travelling through Derbyshire as well, because obviously that's where my family are all from. And I sit there and I look as we're driving through and I'm like, you get that, you understand from the weirdness of the feeling as you're watching why people are inspired to write Wuthering Heights and stuff like that, Jane Eyre getting lost on the moors. You can see that, you can understand why.
Absolutely. So. And I think it can also make you feel like quite small from like a from the standpoint that you're just one person in a history that walks through this place.
And I wonder if that's why it's now the back rooms and why it's set in a shopping centre, because it has that same kind of feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the back rooms rely on aesthetics that revolve around transitionary and forgotten rooms. Some examples that I could think of is like a school corridor after everyone else has gone home, an empty bowling alley, abandoned rooms. I've attached an image I took of a space that I was in, and I found it to fit this kind of liminal aesthetic. The outdated decor, the rust, the out of order sign, the uneven ceiling tiles all contribute to this kind of out of place / out of timeness that this image exudes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going based off this image, it's to me, it comes across as very much like a school bathroom. It's got this like pastel-y pink tile, and then around the top is a border of black and pink tiles. It looks like the pink is a bit outdated. The rust under the hand dry like gucks me out purely for like germs reasons, but it does. The fact that like it's out of order as well, it does kind of feel like you're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, I think it's the poor maintenance, the old decor, and the kind of like yuckiness of it all. It looks sticky almost.
Yes.
Makes it feel like a room that got closed off in an old building and is only now being reopened for like modernisation and construction. This was actually a bathroom in a shopping centre.
Oh really?
Yeah. And I had to make sure no one else was in the room when I took the picture.
Oh, you took it?
Yeah, I took that picture. I was visiting family and I went into the bathroom and I was like, ew.
We'll put it on our Instagram as well so you guys can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I hope someone doesn't identify it and then I get in trouble with the shopping centre.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Shopping Centre, you've got a liminal space in you.
Yeah. So I think that the kind of concept of backrooms as a horror works really, really well, because the idea of occupying a space that you're not meant to be in is almost unnerving.
Yeah.
There's something about standing somewhere that you kind of shouldn't be, all alone with no sense of time, that just puts you on edge. You're not maybe frightened, but you're aware. Do you kind of agree with that? Do you have experience of being like unsettled in liminal spaces?
Yeah, definitely. I spend a lot of my time actually in, I guess, classic liminal spaces. You know, working at a school, I spend a lot of time there when the kids aren't around, so I get to be in that liminal space there. But also having a drama background in theatres when there's nobody there is like the ultimate liminal space, because it's usually so full of life and energy and excitement that when you go into that space and it's not there, it feels really weird. I will say I have had a really interesting experience with the liminal space at the old Aberdale Picture House in Sheffield. I used to be part of an amateur dramatics club there. What's important to know about the Aberdale Picture House is that it is old. It is abandoned for the most part. We did plays and shows there to try and raise money to fix the roof. Cool. And it used to be like an old cinema that was then converted into other stuff. And it is a beautiful building and is gorgeous to look at. It is stand out on the Sheffield skyline. And one day people were rehearsing on stage and we went upstairs. There was like a ladder that could lead up to like a secondary part on the stage, a balcony. So we went up the staircase, which we weren't supposed to go into unless you're going up onto the balcony. And we just kind of decided to sit there for a little bit and like do some ghost hunting, because I was a teenager and that's what I did.
Yeah.
Absolute creep that I am. And we were sat there and we could hear people rehearsing on stage and we could see out into the seating area. And there was nobody there. There was no seats. There was no nothing. Just this empty, dark building. And all of a sudden, it felt like there was a cold presence with us sat there. And you could literally, like, walk up a couple of steps and you'd be normal temperature. Walk down a couple of steps, you'd be cold. And then walk further down, you'd be warm again. Like, it was literally stood and sat on this one step of these stairs going up to the balcony. So it was just kind of like this cool mixture of liminal spaces, an empty theatre when people weren't there, a staircase as well. It was just a really spooky moment.
I mean, that sounds really cool, to be honest, and that kind of reminds me of the kind of concept that buildings hold on to memories.
Yes, definitely.
So, wow, that's a really cool story.
Yeah.
I like that. And the idea of staircases, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a lot of creepypasta kind of stuff online.
Briefly.
But there was a series of stories a good few years back about staircases appearing in forests.
Oh!
And if you go up them, anything could happen. Like, you might just come back down and you don't think anything could happen, but something really bad has happened somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was a lot to do with, like, the park ranger stories.
Oh, okay, I don't know them.
Do you know what? They were really, like, good to listen to. If I'll try and find a couple and link them at the bottom.
Thanks.
Liminal spaces don't always have to be bad. There's an excitement to be had sitting in, like, McDonald's after a concert at 2 o'clock in the morning and no one else is sat around, but there's that, you know, energy. Or if you're, like, travelling somewhere at night and you stop off at a service station, and usually during the day it could be absolutely packed with families going on holidays or travelling. But if you get there at the right time, it's dark and it's quiet and it's just... Yes, it's a little bit out of place, but it doesn't feel bad. It's more of, like, just peaceful.
Yeah.
And it inspires a lot of, like, lo-fi online that you see.
Yes.
It's like 2 o'clock in the morning having a smoke, lo-fi and all that kind of stuff. So just because it's liminal doesn't necessarily mean bad. It's just the feeling of liminal. Yeah. So how does this link to the Fae?
Are you going to tell me?
I don't know, maybe. In various folklore legends, the Fae are intrinsically tied to the idea of a parallel plane. Spirits and ghosts are also said to occupy other planes of existence, and these planes are said to be closer at certain points and places. Think Halloween, fairy rings, All Saints' Day, that kind of time periods. In Irish folklore, I do apologise for my pronunciation, Eosai are said to walk along fairy paths and live much like humans but in parallel worlds.
Oh, cool.
But completely unseen to us. This liminality is observed in all of fairy folklore, but Mara Starling put it very succinctly. She said, they move between two worlds and can be perceived as both spirit and non-spirit. They are often conflated with the dead, and yet they are very much alive. They are visible, yet invisible. And not to lace too much of my personal opinion into it, but doesn't it just seem like such a cop-out to you?
I mean, no, not really. I kind of understand what Mara is trying to allude to here. And I think it is really important to bear in mind that actually Mara Starling is from Anasmon, and a lot of the lore around the fairies there is that they are the spirits of old druids. So that whole thing about them being conflated with the dead, potentially the spirits of the old druids, but yet they're very much alive. It's this duality of, like, because they exist on a different plane, they can move between it, but they are more alive than, like, a ghost would be, for example. Knowing what I've read about the fairy, I think she's put it really nicely there that, like, we can see fairy as more than one thing necessarily. Maybe they are ghosts or maybe they are spirits, but maybe they're also this whole other race of little people.
No, I think Mara summed it up really fantastically. I'm saying the idea of, like, this invisibility and visibility is a cop-out. Not what she was saying, but more like the actual law is such a cop-out. I mean, it's just all too flaky for my liking. I can feel like how many blood vessels would just pop in my eyes if I had to argue with someone about a fairy encounter. Like, I have too seen a fairy. You don't know her. She lives in a different mound. Yeah, well, you haven't seen her because she doesn't want you to see her. She can be invisible when she wants to, because that's just essentially the entire argument.
Yeah, but, like, wouldn't you choose to not be seen by certain people if you could? Like, really?
I mean, maybe that's a problem. Deep down, I'm just jealous because I have to be perceived, and I don't want to be perceived. But it's just the entire idea of, well, I couldn't actually take any photos because it turned invisible, and no, you can't see any physical evidence because the fairy just doesn't want you to see it. It's just impossible to take at face value from anyone. In Rebel Folklore by Icy Sedgwick, she discusses the Banshee. The Banshee, or fairy woman, emits a keening sound to announce impending death. This sound is said to accompany the dead to the other world as they pass through. She is not an entity that just kind of roams around the world always. When she's not screaming, she's not just wandering about.
Just having a cup of tea in the fairy
world. She appears to announce impending death. which suggests that she is primarily in a different realm.
Right.
As a side note for this, the illustrations by Melissa in this book are seriously so beautiful. The association of fairies with the liminal is not just linked to folklore. Let's look at a media example of this. Rox, can you recall a particular Shakespearean play that makes a reference to this?
I feel like I started a thing with Shakespeare that I can't take back now, and it was my fault because I started it.
It's the Arthur. It's the King Arthur from literature.
You started the King Arthur.
Oh, I know.
Okay, so Macbeth definitely discusses liminal places with the witches upon the heath, things like that, the battlefields. And there's the moment where Lady Macbeth is wandering around sleepwalking, I would suggest as a liminal space. Romeo and Juliet with the balcony scene, what light from yonder window. We're talking about the light passing from the living space into the dark night. We've got the balcony stretching from the inside to the outside, could be considered liminal. I guess A Midsummer Night's Dream 2 is also highly associated with fairies and that whole midsummer you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. So A Midsummer's Night Dream is exactly what I was kind of angling for there. But you've given me so many good examples of liminality in Shakespeare. Midsummer and the summer solstice is, kind of one of those days where the veil is said to be very, very thin between the physical and non-physical planes. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year, and I think in the play the fairy king Oberon and the other fae folk cause mischief with the humans but actually do no real harm.
Yes.
But how does this kind of like link in to the science then, all of this planes and folklore chatter? So let's visit my favourite subject. That's right, physics. And not just physics, quantum mechanics.
Oh my god, what? How have you tied quantum mechanics into this?
Rox, have you heard about the many worlds interpretation, or can you hazard a guess to what it is?
I'm gonna guess it's something to do with the idea that there's like multiple realms or layers of worlds existing, like going to reveal my absolute nerd here, but like Dungeons and Dragons has got like the Fae realm and the Nine Hells and the astral plane and stuff like that.
I think a lot of Norse mythology has like the different worlds as well.
Yeah.
That's cool. Kind of keep that in your mind. I'm going to preface my little dip into quantum mechanics by first of all saying this is not my field of study. This is not even a field of interest. This is my field of loathing. And in my field of loathing, the seeds of confusion, despair and disgust are watered with plentiful showerings of self-doubt and imposter syndrome over am I actually a scientist if I can't understand this. This is a subject that baffles, perplexes and infuriates me. So please do not take what I say here as gospel. And if you are listening to this as a quantum physicist and are recoiling in horror at my attempts to explore this, then by all means feel free to contact and correct any mistakes that are made. I'm familiar with the idea of multiple universes existing in an infinite capacity. The very controversial many worlds interpretation hinges on the idea there are multiple outcomes but we can only detect one.
So like chance.
Kind of.
Okay.
I kind of get what you... Yeah. So, looking at Schrodinger's cat, the cat in the box is dead and alive. Once the box is open, we will know which one, but that doesn't mean that the alternative outcome does not exist.
Right.
And at one point, both outcomes are possible.
Right.
Quantum Magazine summarises the theory as the universe splits into multiple realities with every measurement.
Right, sure.
So at every possible junction where a decision is made, the alternative could be made, and that's where it splits into a different reality.
Yes.
Or universe. However, Quantum Magazine also summarises the criticisms very well, and I'm just going to read a passage from it.
Okay.
The implication undermines a scientific description of the world far more seriously than those of any of its rivals. The multi-world interpretation tells you not to trust any empiricism at all. Rather than imposing the observer on the scene, it destroys any credible accountability of what an observer can possibly be. Some Everettians, which I think is one of the people who contributed to this theory, insist that this is not a problem and that you should not be troubled by it. Perhaps you are not, but I am. So the multi-world theory, I think, similar to this idea of parallel planes of existence, although at least in the many worlds many worlds theory, it isn't so far-fetched as to assert that creatures can pass from one plane to another. But I really do agree on what you're saying about, I don't really trust a theory that tells you to bin your interpretation of empirical data.
Sure.
But Rox, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the many worlds theory makes more sense to me than there not being more than one world. Realistically, it's kind of like an onion. If you peel away the layers of what we know, we find more things, and that's how science works. So I think that if we find a way to peel away our existence and reality as we know it, we might find something even more so underneath that, or above it, or in it. Like pocket dimensions, I guess.
Okay, but do you think the split is at every decision made about that alternative outcome? Because I think it's interesting, but to me, this is a completely unproven theory, I will state that, and in my mind, it skirts closer to science fiction than science fact.
Sure, and I can get that, because, so many different pop culture things have explored this. Futurama, Doctor Who, this is such a common trope almost, is that you make a decision, do you turn left or right, and it'll change your entire world kind of thing. But I don't know if I agree with it on the basis of every decision you make then splinters the world, because I feel like if that were to happen, it would just I don't know there's enough energy in the world to create that, essentially.
So you're saying that there's maybe not enough energy in the world for there to be infinite?
Yeah, I think there is enough on there for there to be more than one world and plane that we can't understand and exist yet. Mm-hmm. But if energy is never created or destroyed, where are we getting the energy from in order to create that splinter world, you know?
No, I get what you're saying. I'm not a many worlds subscriber. I think it's a really interesting theory, but I just don't have enough of an understanding of how the universe works on that quantum mechanical level to know if I believe it's truth or not. For me, it's very much, can it be measured? Can it be seen?
Yeah.
If it can't be seen, can it be measured? Can it be can traits of it be observed? And we just can't.
And that's where a lot of my beliefs lie, in that we don't have the instruments or the methodology yet to measure what is happening, essentially.
Yeah, maybe. And I think, like I've said previously, to be a scientist, you have to be open-minded.
Yeah.
Science is constantly changing, and your mind should change as the data evolves.
I do think it's definitely an option, though, that ghosts and fairies could exist on a realm that is not the same as ours, and therefore they can pass between the two in maybe these liminal places.
Okay, yeah, maybe. And you know what? If there's anything that, if it can measure or determine this, then I will change my mind on it.
Fair enough.
Which is, I'm not die hard in my beliefs, but if I can't observe, measure, or see any kind of evidence, then it's hard to say. So, back to fairies. The liminal is a transitional stage. Fairies and nature are intrinsically linked, and I think that part of that is because nature itself is permanently transitional.
Sure. Cyclical.
Yeah, exactly, nature's cyclical. And constantly transitioning from one season to the next. What are the transitions of the season marked by?
The intensity of the sunlight that hits different points on the Earth as it tilts on its axis?
Yes.
That's not what you meant, is it?
No.
No, you meant the solstices.
Yay!
So the days in the year that represent the times, such as shortest day, longest night, equinoxes, where day and night is exactly the same amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The solstices and the equinoxes. And as we touched on them earlier, about those being the points where the veils are supposed to be the thinnest. But let's take a brief look at trees.
What?
Yes, some you can call transitional. They grow buds, they flower, they produce leaves, they drop leaves, and they repeat. Maybe some are evergreens and they don't do any of that. But if we look at the tree itself, the roots sink down into the ground past what we can perceive. The trunks are in our perception. They're kind of level with us. And then the branches reach upwards towards the heavens and the skies.
Oh, I love that.
So I think this is kind of part of why world trees are so culturally significant, and I love a world tree, but I'm saving this for a later episode.
Is an oak a world tree, then?
I think it definitely does have some folklore significance. I've got books and books of it, but if you ask me to repeat off the top of my head, I'm afraid I can't really pull loads of stuff out. Now let's do a little sidestep. I'm going to pretend that I'm a believer in fairies.
Welcome to the club!
of pretending.
Well, no. Of believing in fairies.
If a fairy can travel between planes, then they must have a portal.
Yeah.
They must have somewhere where they can come back and forth.
Yeah.
So, I wonder what that portal would be like. Say, Rox, if you had to pick a living organism, what organism would you say best represents the liminal?
Organism? Okay, that's something that's like alive. My gosh, you're asking the difficult questions this season. My first thought is black cat, because they like disappear when they close their eyes into dark spaces and stuff like that. But actually, considering it more, I think I'm going to have to go with spiders and their webs, because they tend to live in the liminal places in our homes almost, I mean, I guess as like a guardian in like windows and doorways. So yeah, I'm going to go with good old spiders.
Do you know what? That's a good choice, and I really, really like that.
Thanks.
That also kind of reminds me of like soot sprites, which are in like My Neighbor Totoro and also in Spirited Away. But yeah, do you know what? Spiders is a hell of a good answer.
What would you pick?
I would pick mushrooms.
Ooh.
Now, the reason that I would pick mushrooms is that unless you kind of dig into the ground, you only tend to see the fruiting mushrooms and rarely the mycelium network. Rox, what's the most common portal associated with fae folk?
Fairy rings or water.
Precisely. To be continued. That concludes my first episode back. I am super stoked to be here again with Rox and to be burying myself in piles of books and digging through old internet stuff. Big shout out to the Internet Archives. What a resource. I absolutely love it.
I love having my brain stretched as well by the science stuff, where I'm like having to close my eyes and visualise to keep track.
It's also really funny because as I'm working on my masters and I'm having to cite sources, I've got to go, is this a reliable source? And then when I'm doing this, I'm like, haha, a magazine.
Yeah.
Get in there. A blog post. Yeah. Harvard reference that bad boy.
Absolutely.
So if you guys are as excited about the coming season as we are, then feel free to contact us through Threads, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube and Spotify. Hit us up on anything, and if you see any videos or posts that you'd like us to kind of talk about or explore, then please tag us in it. Rox, what is our?
Hashtag Sitnos, SITNOS.
We also have our email address, scaredinthenameofscience@gmail.com. We promise we will check it at least a little bit periodically. And yeah, so feel free to email us with any pictures or images that you would like us to look at and discuss.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, guys.